Well, what do you know? Another Marvel Snap season begins tomorrow, and I'm actually kind of hyped about this one. I really like a lot of the cards. I think we're gonna have some strong cards. I really like the flavor of, like, wizards and spells and medieval fantasy for my Hearthstone days. So actually really pumped about this Marvel Snap season. I hope it does go well. So we're going to talk about all of the upcoming cards in this video that have officially been revealed via the seasonal video. We're going to talk about how good they're going to be, decks you might play them in, and I'm going to rate each of them from 1 to 4 stars, giving you my best guess, locking in my predictions for those who are going to have the biggest impact on the meta. That should not guide your purchasing decisions. You should wait to see how they perform, but it is fun at least to speculate a little. So we're going to kick things off here with the new season pass card, Merlin. And he is a 2/3 with, at the start of each turn, add an incantation to your hand. And the incantations are skills. I'm representing that here with the fact that they do not have a power value. Nobody has the images of the new skill card frames with, like, the little circle and stuff. So that's why these still look like squares, but you'll know their skills because they don't have power numbers. And the 3 skills are Omniversal Presence. It's 1 cost. On reveal, replace this location with a new one and give Merlin +2 power. Number 1, I think that is just like an insanely good skill. Location Disruption is incredibly valuable. People run cards just for that. So you're not only getting that super high utility effect, but you're also getting +2 power on your Merlin. And the next up here, we have Polymorph. Again, 1 cost. On reveal, transform your lowest power card here into one that costs 2 more, which that's a super high value transformation. Cersei is a card that has gotten played some in the past, only buffing things by 1 cost. This is going up 2. That's probably going to be worth like 4+ power on average, I think. Sometimes at certain breakpoints, probably even a little more than that. Taking a 1 cost card into a 3, if it's like a rock or a squirrel or a Thanos Infinity Stone, you're going to be pushing that up to like 5 power in many instances, and then sometimes net a nice effect too. You're going to get like an on reveal or an ongoing that's exciting as well. So again, insanely strong, I think. And then Once and Future is the final skill here. It is 1 cost. On reveal, shuffle your lowest power card here into your deck to get +2 energy next turn, which this does feel like the weakest to me. Like, the +2 energy is nice, as we've seen from like Bolts of Balthak. We know the like acceleration factor of that can be really valuable. Like, if you play this on turn 3, you go into turn 4 able to play a 6-drop. Like, cheating out a 6-drop turn early or 2 turns early can actually be really, really impactful, right? That could be the sort of thing that makes this feel really good, but do keep in mind, it's coming at some power cost because you're sacrificing that lowest power card. Now, on occasion, that could be good. If you put like a hood in your deck or something, you shuffle the hood into your deck, it might actually be a net power gain, but often, it might be a little bit of a power loss. Not to mention, you are technically probably making your deck a little bit worse on average because there's a chance now that you redraw that bad thing that you shuffled away. Maybe not a disaster for the hood, but might be a disaster if you're shuffling away a rock or a squirrel or whatever, some throwaway thing that you don't necessarily want to get back, and you draw that instead of the good thing. So that one feels a little bit more like sort of a balancing act. There's some good, there's some bad aspects to it, where the other two, to me, they just feel really strong. Like, they technically have risk or downside inherent to them because the location could backfire. The minion, the unit you transform into could backfire. But ultimately, like 97% of the time, they're going to feel like huge net gains. Once and Future doesn't feel like quite as much of a net gain to me. Keep in mind, it's only really kind of gaining you 1 energy in total because you're spending 1 to get 2. It's more about kind of cheating things out a little faster, or creating like bigger swing turns later in the game is definitely a possibility. So still a valuable thing to do in many cases, just has a little bit of a hedge to it, I would say, unlike the other options. But ultimately, regardless, 2 out of 3 look insane. All 3 are useful. And this is a really cheap thing to get going. This has those big time like Kate Bishop vibes where, play a 2 cost card, get a bunch of awesome stuff to do. These are trickled out to you instead of getting 2 immediately. But that's still really nice because you're going to be able to fill in little turns here and there with, just like, okay, this is the perfect little curve filler. I had 1 extra energy anyway. That's great. Also keep in mind, it can be something like keeps your hand size full, so there are some synergies there. We're going to be taking a look at a card in a second which just cares about playing skills, so having multiple extra skills off your Merlin can really stack buddy Nicolas Scratch up. I think he's here literally next. After you play a skill, +1 power. That's nice when you're generating a bunch of different skills from Merlin. So ultimately, like, this just looks like a very strong card to me. Like, perfect, usability across a variety of decks. I think tons of decks can actually run this successfully. Frankly, maybe almost any deck can run this successfully. There might be some that lean into it more if they have tokens, say like a Thanos build could really value this because there are multiple ways here, bouncing off, having those small things playing around. But I wouldn't be shocked to see this jump into any kind of tempo deck that's playing for curve. There's just a lot of good stuff to do here. So I think we're going to see this card a lot as one of those like universally good season pass cards. I'm expecting this card to feel good. Maybe not like oppressive either. We might get a little sick of locations changing off Omniversal Presence, but ultimately still a card I think is going to feel quite powerful, quite rewarding, and probably going to be a bit of a powerhouse. So go ahead and moving on over to Nicolas Scratch. You'll note I wrote unconfirmed up here at the top because we know this guy's coming. They put out a graphic that says Nicolas Scratch is on the way as one of these Series 4 cards, but they didn't include his stats or his effect. So I'm like 97% sure this is what he'll look like. This is the currently, most updated data mined version of the card. So, I think it's very, very likely this is how he hits, but technically there could still be a bit of surprise because he wasn't actually in the seasonal reveal video, just teased after the fact. But I'm assuming, again, he's a 1/2 with after you play a skill +1 power, which makes him this nice little 1 cost scaler for any decks running a bunch of skills. Even if you're just running a Merlin and you play Merlin, on turn 2, that already makes this guy pretty decent, assuming you're playing those skills, because you're basically playing one presumably on turn 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's already +4 for your Nicolas Scratch. As soon as you get an Agamotto into the mix, or a couple other cards we're going to see today with even more skills, then that makes this guy often look like a 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, which, as we know, that's big for a 1 cost card. That's the kind of scaling you need. I think the question here is just like, how much will you have to lean into it to feel worth it? Because there's some consistency issues, because you can't just rely on Merlin, because if you're playing Nicolas Scratch on 1 and you don't hit Merlin on 2, like, this guy is going to feel pretty unsatisfying just staying as a 1/2. So you probably need to commit to at least 2 or 3 things that are getting you some skill usage, and then you probably have the reliability you're expecting for Mr. Scratch. So I think there's definitely going to be worlds where that happens. And as the game gets older and older and older, right, we're going to end up inevitably with more and more skills and skills and skills getting added into the mix, which means, the sky is the limit for this guy really as we go. You could imagine a deck that's like all skill cards eventually, and this guy becomes like a 1/10 or something, assuming they're all cheap enough, a 1/12, whatever. The numbers could just get bigger and bigger. So this might be one that's not super compelling right away, but even, throughout the month, as more skill cards get released this month, we might see him get more and more powerful as things go. So definitely a card to keep an eye on, and probably a good one to have in your back pocket for all these new skill cards. Now, another unconfirmed card here is Jennifer Kale. Again, we know Jennifer Kale is coming. We don't know for sure that these are her stats or her text. Again, these are the most updated data mined versions. Usually at this stage, those go unchanged. So probably a 2/2 with activate. Next turn, you get +1 energy, just not 100% locked in. Just know that the card itself is on the way. And this becomes obviously a bit of a ramp card here. It looks a lot like Psylocke when you look at it, right? Oh, a 2 cost that's 2 power that gives me +1 energy. The key distinction here being that this is on an activate instead of an on reveal, so you can save this +1 energy for a key moment. So like with Psylocke, when you play that on 2, you're hoping to cheat out a 4 cost card. You can't do that with Jennifer Kale because she has to go down on 2. You won't be able to activate until she's already on board on turn 3, which means the soonest you could get the +1 energy is turn 4. So you might want to use a card like this to, cheat out a 5 cost card as opposed to a 4 cost card. So, Psylocke has been used for Mr. Negative because you want to get that down as soon as possible. What kind of 5 cost cards might Jennifer Kale be used for? I think about things like maybe Infinity Ultron. That's one where sometimes it's hard to get those stones down when you play him on 5, but if you start playing him instead on 4, that might give you more windows to play the stones. Is he rewarding enough to do that? No, I don't think so. Clearly not as rewarding as an early Mr. Negative. But any kind of 5-cost card that needs time or needs that could be a home for Jennifer Kale. Another scenario is where you just try to, for some reason or another, give yourself like 7 energy on turn 6. You just want to make sure you always have 7 energy on turn 6. Say like a Deadpool and Null deck. They often want to play that Deadpool and that Null together on the final turn because usually both are pretty big. They do that sometimes through X23. If that dies at the right time on turn 5, they end up with 7 energy on turn 6. This could be like a backup plan to do that, or we could see other combinations where you really want to play a 3-cost card and a 4-cost card, like a Silver Surfer and an Absorbing Man, right? There are little lines here that become possible because of the timing for Jennifer Kale. Now, you know, a Psylocke could also do that, but that also eats into your turn 5. Jennifer, you can play down on turn 2, safely deposit her on board. She's chilling, she's vibing, and then you save her until that key moment later. So there might be little sequence combinations there where Jennifer Kale also creates some opportunity. You can also just toss this into a generic ramp deck where you're like trying to get 2 6-drops down. You want to play Doctor Doom into Odin? Well, you know, this gives you 6 energy on turn 5 if you want to go that route instead of 5 energy on turn 4. So a few different ways to slice it here, obviously, thanks to this activate. Just not good for turn 4 plays, which we've historically seen these cheat cards be most relevant for, but that doesn't mean she doesn't find a home. So, you know, I don't see an obvious path out of all those examples right now that's like, oh, this changes everything, this becomes a meta deck, but I certainly think is another card to keep in your back pocket. There will be some ramp decks that can utilize this successfully and other little combinations that care. So Jennifer, probably not a star from day one, but I think still a solid option down the road. Something will be like, oh yeah, Jennifer's perfect for unlocking this very specific thing. So next up here, moving on to Nightmare. This card got some crazy big changes since we initially saw it in the data mined version, because it used to be a 2/2. And I told you in the leaked cards video for this one, like, this looks completely insane to me. Like 2/2's outrageous. Now it's a 3-1. So not only did this increase in cost, it got nerfed by 3 powers. This is straight up living in that like Mr. Negative space now, which is completely insane to me. So this must have been tested and been like crazy busted as a 2/2 to nerf it this hard. And I still think this has a lot of potential because this text is just very powerful. On reveal, replace the text of each card in your hand with text from a random card of the same cost. So in essence, this kind of lives in a Sauron space. You know, Sauron is taking all of those cards with really bad text, detrimental text, the Star Brands, the Red Skulls, etc., where you don't want those texts. And Sauron's just removing them. And that has already made that sort of deck really good. Like, historically been a sleeper deck, but very, very good for a long time. It's actually been a top tier meta deck since Sauron's buff to 2 mana. Not as many people played it, but it's just very, very good. And Sauron just got nerfed. Many people, myself included, think in preparation for Nightmare, because you can actually use both of these together, because Sauron now affects cards in the deck and Nightmare affects cards in hand. So they might have been thinking about a world where both of those are happening, and maybe that just became too overwhelming. Because unlike Sauron, you know, that kind of resets you to a stat neutral standpoint where it's like, okay, I just get a 3/10 Starbrand and I'm super pumped. With Nightmare, Starbrand doesn't just become textless. He might potentially get some insane text. Like, you know, Starbrand might turn into a speed. And instead of being a 3/10, suddenly he's like a 3/16 because now he gets awesome bonus text. And like Red Skull might not just, you know, turn into a base 5/14. Red Skull might turn into an Infinity Ultron that's now a 5/14 that gives you stones that summon another 14 power card, or duplicate or double them up to a 5/28 or whatever, right? So suddenly, you know, it's not just like raising the floor, it's raising the ceiling to a crazy degree where like every card transformed by Nightmare now becomes an absolute nightmare potentially. There's obviously risk there. Some things could be bad. You could sometimes hit effects that are really detrimental to you and make things super hard to work with. You know, what if your Red Skull becomes a Hobgoblin? Not good. Like, that's not good. You can choose not to play it, but like suddenly, you know, you've got a like super dead card in that scenario. Or like, what if your Red Skull turns into a Valkyrie even? It's like, well, shoot. Now my 14 power Red Skull becomes a 3 power Red Skull. So, you know, I think generally most cards do good things And generally your card is going to get better, but there will be those instances where you low roll and it's like, oh crap, it's a MODOK now. I don't know if I can play this MODOK, and it becomes a bit of a problem. So, you know, the good thing about Marvel Snap is in games where that happens, you just retreat. You're out, man. You take your 1 cube and you go. But there are going to be other games where the opponent has no idea what you're about to do, and your card becomes insane, and it gives you an enormous advantage, and you get to snap on that asymmetrical knowledge. So you get to benefit from the bonus cubes, and your opponent's just sitting there helpless with no clue what is about to happen to them. So ultimately, huge cube equity card, huge potential, can probably be played with Sauron, might be fine without it. This just looks very, very strong to me. I think even with this huge nerf, still a crazy powerful card. Also really fun. I'm quite excited to play this. Actually, I think so far all the cards actually look pretty fun. They're all exciting, but this one looks just completely busted to me, even after monster nerfs. All right, so moving on here to Morgan Le Fay. She is now a 4/7. I think this is a 4/5 last time we saw her in the data mines, and she has on reveal, return all your discarded and destroyed cards to hand with +3 power. So you know, destroy or discard a bunch of stuff early, slam down your Morgan on turn 4, turn 5, whatever, and get yourself some really nice, potentially high statted things to replay before the end of the game. Now, like at a base level, I look at that and I go, okay, yeah, that's really nice buff. Like +3 is insane. She's a 4/7 now, which actually usually feels pretty okay to play on its own. Like that's not much of a sacrifice. So I do see a lot of potential with this card. I'm thinking like, man, those numbers all really make sense to me. I will say, as I like went to kind of like plan a deck around this and like looking at destroy decks and discard decks, it didn't become like inherently obvious to me what cards I wanted this to work with. You know, in other words, I don't know that like normal packages necessarily right now are especially great for this. In large part because many of the times we're discarding or destroying things, they're not actually going into the discarded or destroyed pool. They're like getting summoned to board, say like Wolverine, for instance, or Proxima Midnight, or they are getting added back to hand, like Deadpool, for instance. Those things shouldn't be in the pool for Morgan Le Fay because she says return. So it's only things that are legitimately destroyed and like totally gone, or legitimately discarded and totally gone. So for instance, I was looking at like a discard deck, you know, and like Scorn won't work. Scorn returns to hand herself. You don't get it back from Morgan Le Fay. But Swarm will work because the Swarm, the initial one is gone and you're getting copies added to hand. So you might be able to get a Swarm back. Do keep in mind it will cost 2, the newly added Swarm, because it's not one of the copies that gets discounted. It's like the original Swarm that hasn't been discounted yet. So you can maybe like re-discard it again and then have like some 6 power Swarms in hand. There's some weird lines there with like Morgan on 4, MODOK on 5, big hand of Swarms. I think that's one possibility, assuming I pieced all of that together. Like we need to see all this in action to make sure that's how it works. I think that's how it should work. But, you know, I was thinking, okay, what if you do something more bespoke? In other words, we design a deck for Morgan Le Fay. There do seem to be some options there. I was thinking about like, you know, kind of a bounce destroy deck where instead of bouncing it with like Beast or Falcon or whatever, you play a bunch of 1-drop on reveals that you love. You like play Misery on turn 4 to destroy them. Then you bring them back with Morgan Le Fay on turn 5. Then you get to dump on turn 6 with a bunch of extra buffed on reveal cards. You know, like you play a Rocket Raccoon or whatever, it hits 5, gets destroyed by Misery, maybe actually goes off again in the meantime, and then it gets added to hand. It gets another +3 from Morgan. You have this giant rocket to dump and these like really unpredictable 1-drops to dump on turn 6. So there might be some like really specific ways to play towards this that aren't actually kind of destroy or discard decks right now, because as they're shaped at the moment, they do look a little awkward for what this card is wanting to do. So again, I'll kind of revert to that same stance of like, I don't know actually exactly what's going to happen with this card and what decks are going to look like. I do think there's some risk it doesn't come together immediately, and it's like we don't really figure this out and it kind of looks bad at first. But I think the numbers here are pushed enough that somebody will crack the code on this, even if it takes, you know, a month or two and some other cards or whatever to come out. Something's going to crack the code on this, and maybe it's already there. Like maybe there's that deck exists. I just haven't seen it in my mind yet. And then it becomes powerful because the numbers are really good. The base stat line's good. The +3 power in hand is an insane amount of power potentially. I used Misery as an example, but like Killmonger with a bunch of 1-drops, right? There's like things you can do where all of that has some potential. So, I mean, honestly, like Thanos is on a kind of cool again, right? Like destroy all the Thanos stones and get them back with +3 power and just replay them. Like, you know, as I'm talking through it, literally here, I'm seeing things popping up. So in other words, I think this card is going to be good someday just because +3 power is a ridiculous number. 7 power is good. So in essence, I like the card. All right, next up is the Ancient One. I think this one is like totally unchanged since we saw the data mined versions. It is a 3/5 with on reveal, add Tau Mandala to your hand. Tau Mandala is a 3-cost skill. With on reveal, copy the text of one of your ongoing cards here onto your other characters here. So that is basically like Agamotto's Images of Icon, where that one would copy, stats and effects. This one is specifically just going to duplicate that ongoing effect to other cards. So, dream scenario perhaps is I have 2 squirrels and an Iron Man, and I take that Iron Man effect and put it on both of my squirrels, and now I have 3 Iron Mans in that location, and then, I slam down a living tribunal or something, right? And it's like, boom, that's a deck all in one. Pray to God they don't have Enchantress or Rogue or whatever. I mean, even Rogue might be okay, as long as they don't hit the tribunal. But, that is the kind of possible plays here for Tau Mandala. That might be a little bit too greedy of a situation, like the Iron Man Tribunal Dream is probably what I'm gonna try ASAP, because that sounds like super fun and hilarious, and I'd like to do that. And you could even put an Onslaught there, and then I guess you could copy Onslaughts as well if you lined it up. Might be hard to fit all that in a game, but ultimately anyway, like the ceiling on this is just insane, through the roof, game-winning kind of plays. The kind of like expected result might be different. I was thinking about like normal decks who might be able to utilize this well. Something like Zoo came to mind, copying maybe a Blue Marvel with a couple 1-cost cards there next to it, a Kazar, even an Ant-Man might actually be a solid result. Do keep in mind this is going to pick one of the like random ongoings. If you have multiple ongoings in a given spot, you don't really know what you're going to get. Might be worth the risk sometime anyway. But you need a deck that essentially has a mix of low cost little guys, and I say low cost just because you had to have time to get all of this out and played. So Zoo deck, for instance, has a lot of little stuff in there, some squirrels, some Shauna cards, whatever. You plop one big rewarding ongoing, and then you copy that, because it is ultimately going to take 6 energy to do this, because you got to play Ancient One, you got to play the skill. If you're gonna focus into one location that hard with like 2 small guys and a big ongoing, it's taken a lot of time to get all that done. So, your deck has to be built with all of that in mind. So Zoo seemed like a reasonable fit. Honestly, again, Thanos seems like Thanos just works with everything because it does so many things, but there's some interesting Thanos opportunities. But I do think deck building will be the hardest challenge for this card. And then just lining it up sometimes will be the hardest challenge too. The great thing about Images of Icon, I think, is like it kind of worked in a pinch in a lot of scenarios. Copying Galactas felt really good. You don't have to have a big 10+ power thing to copy for Images of Icon to feel interesting. Tau Mandala, I think you might need more consistent results or like bigger payoffs for it to be worth it, because you're just spending 3 energy up front for the Ancient One. Like, that's already a bit of an investment. Another 3 energy here. It's just a bigger commitment in many ways. And probably less like in a pinch solves. There were so many instances with Images of Icon where I took like the monster from Monster Island and just transformed a couple small things into that, and that's a great scenario. There aren't as many ways to bail yourself out basically with Tau Mandala. Your deck is gonna have to support it, I think, in a dedicated way, specifically with ongoing cards. And ongoing decks as they're built now maybe aren't even necessarily good for this, because there's too many like complementary ongoing effects. Captain Carter wants things with her, and if you transform the wrong pieces, it might not all go to plan. So for instance, in other words, like solid effect, crazy, sky is the limit, absurd results sometimes, just one that's a little bit inconsistent and hard to work for and kind of demanding, I guess, in its deck building constraints. Our next card is Clea. She is a 1/2 and reads, when this permanently gains power, add Flames of the Faltine to your hand. And that is if Clea is in hand or in play. So of course, on board buffs like say Ironheart or Galacta could trigger this, or in hand buffs like say Gwynpool or Toxie, I guess, could also trigger this. In any of those instances, you're going to get a Flames of the Faltine, which is a 1-cost skill with on reveal, afflict an enemy card here with -3 power, which is actually pretty great. We all were really annoyed by Winds of Watum giving -5 for so long when that was getting played a lot. It still does, but it doesn't get played as much. This doesn't move, so the disruption factor definitely a little lower, but might still feel kind of frustrating, in particular, affliction synergies or cards that are relying on power like Captain Carter or, Iron Man locations or something. This can be a really disruptive -3 power hit. So I do think the reward here is fantastic. The problem for me with Clea is just about how many times is this reliably going to activate, and if you activate it more times reliably, does your deck fall apart? So, for instance, stuff like Nakia is really good at activating this. I'm going to give +1 power to everything in hand. I know Clea is going to get hit. I'm going to get a Flames of the Faltine. But then you're running a card we don't really see played much. And we have actually seen quite a few buff decks popping up lately, running, Mr. Sinisters and Broods and Sebastian Shaws and Elsas and Galactas and Gwynpools and Surge. Notably, Surge does not work with Clea. Okoye is another card we've seen some lately. Does not work with Clea because both those are hitting while in deck, not while in hand or in play. So another kind of, hit here against Clea in some ways. So in other words, to pay this off consistently or in a compelling fashion, perhaps, you might have to restructure your deck a little bit. There's also just, fitting in the Flames of Faltine as a 1-cost skill. It's not hard to weave it in necessarily, but it might occasionally disrupt your curve a little bit. Sometimes those decks are running things like Kitty Pride in order to reliably activate Elsas. Flames of the Faltine isn't necessarily as compelling of a 1-cost filler as something like Kitty Pride if it's reliably reactivating Elsa multiple times. So, I just like the things that play nicely with this don't necessarily, I think, play all that nicely with this. And I could see some scenarios where you get your Clea. Maybe it hits once, maybe it hits 0, and you feel like you've maybe kind of wasted a spot in your deck. Or even when it does hit once or twice, maybe it's hard to pay it off significantly. I don't see any lines with Affliction decks needing this because they're not going to have the pieces necessary to reliably give Clea permanent power, I don't think. So it's just a little bit clunky as far as I'm concerned. And I can see why, this was initially data mined at -2 and is now -3. Maybe this card needed a little bit of a boost to get some help. I'm having a hard time envisioning a deck coming together around this that looks good and cohesive and complete. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much. Maybe this is just kind of a freebie to toss in, and when it occasionally hits, you're happy and you didn't really sacrifice too much from a cost or, deck construction standpoint to get it there. So we'll see. I do have a feeling, though, this comes up a little short too often to feel great, or just kind of awkward. Am I putting this on board? Am I keeping it in hand? What am I doing with this card? And having a deck that does both of those well. But, if you hit the Toxie early and then you hit a Galacta for it later, finish turn 6 with a couple Flames, it's not a disaster. I think you'll feel pretty good about that in some instances. All right, so moving on to our final card here. This is the big one, the big fella. This is Dormammu. Super exciting to see him in the game. He's a 7/10. I think he looks pretty similar to when we saw him in the data mined version earlier. He has a game start effect. Begin a summoning ritual. And that basically is going to add step 1 to your hand. Step 1, as you can see to the right there, is a 0-cost skill that has on reveal, merge your highest power destroyed card with Dormammu to continue. So basically, you're going to need something that has been destroyed, at which point you can then play your summoning ritual. That card is going to merge with Dormammu. Presumably, Dormammu can be either in hand or in your deck, and that merged card will fuse stats with Dormammu. So, let's say you're a destroy deck and you play down a Bucky Barnes, you destroy the Bucky, you cast summoning ritual. Dormammu is now a 7/11 because of that Bucky Barnes. Now you get step 2 added to hand automatically after step 1 completes. That says on reveal, Dormammu steals 1 power from each card here to continue. So this one you can just kind of play out whenever. You probably want to steal some power from your opponent's cards. You play it somewhere they got 2 or 3 things. You're going to steal, let's say 3 power from the cards, that location. Dormammu, by the way, still in hand, still in deck. Wherever he was, that's still where he's at. He's going to steal that power, I think, regardless of where he is. It'll probably have like a little thing that pops up and shows you. Let's say he steals 3 power. Your Dormammu is now up to a 7-14. You've also, of course, debuffed your opponent's location, giving them some negative power. So now you automatically get step 3 added to hand by completing the next step of the ritual. Step 3 is 3 cost, and it reads, on reveal, destroy 2 of your characters here to summon Dormammu. So you're going to, again, need a little bit of a sacrifice here to continue this summoning ritual. So if you're a destroy deck, as I think you're pretty much always going to be when running this card, or at least very often going to be, say now you've got, I don't know, a Wolverine and an X-23 in a location, you get yourself a nice 3 cost destroy here in the vein of, Venom or Deathlock or whatever. No power this time, but ultimately that is how you're now going to summon Dormammu, pulling a 14 power card into play for a total expenditure, mind you, of only 4 energy. You spend 0, 1, and 3. You don't have to spend the 7 on Dormammu. He gets summoned for free. He is basically a 4-14 in that case. That was not a particularly big example. You can obviously make your Dormammu even bigger by stealing more power from more cards, including your own and your opponent's. You could kill something bigger to kick it off. Dormammu could easily be a 20 power card, which, sometimes you might feel like you've sacrificed some of your own power or one of your own cards to do that, but that might just be something you're happy to do anyway. If you're destroying big awesome things to kick off the ritual, like, that's totally fine. You want to destroy your Wolverines or whatever regardless. So I think ultimately here, getting a really big Dormammu down for only 4 energy, and for 4 energy that mind you often just synergizes with your deck, because I think this is a destroy card payoff. That seems really good to me. And the great thing is too, like, all of this just starts in hand. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to draw Dormammu. So you're just playing a normal destroy deck. This kind of feels like a free bonus of just a monster target on board sometimes, which can help spread some threat around from your Knolls or whatever else that you're playing as a big payoff in your destroy deck. So in essence, I think this looks really good. There's a little bit of a timing concern sometimes, just making sure you get your cards like destroyed fast enough, but often you'll be kicking off that first step like on turn 3, playing a Carnage or a Venom or whatever after playing a couple little Wolverines or Deadpools or something. So you're kicking it off on turn 3, play the summoning ritual on turn 4, play the third step on turn 5. Like, that's totally fine. Save turn 6 for a Null or whatever. You're still going to be destroying things. You're still going to be, moving the normal game plan of the deck forward. And probably won't be hard to reliably activate step 3, because you should pretty much always have some way to destroy 2 things, and it will pretty much always be worth it to summon the giant dude. So ultimately, yeah, I think this looks very strong, very free, very cheap for what it does. I don't know that this has a lot of applications outside of like exactly a destroy deck. There might be ways to work it without running, super consistent destroys. You just need kind of 1 to kick it off and then 2 cards to keep it going. They don't have to be destroy cards. So there might be other homes for it too, but it definitely looks like an obvious fit in destroy, and I think that's where it will shine the most as designed. And I do think it'll be a nice value add for that deck. By the way, destroy is sleeper good. Nobody really plays it at high levels, but every time I look at the data, it's like in the top 5 or 6 decks. Like Deadpool destroy is good, just a little underplayed. So ultimately, this might be a boost to push it into that really, really top tier status where a lot of people are playing it, because I certainly think this is going to be a very exciting card. All right, so all that said, now let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting with best and going down to the worst. Merlin is a 4-star card. Nightmare is a 4-star card. Dormammu is a 4-star card. Morgan Le Fay is a 3-star card. Nicolas Scratch is a 3-star card. Jennifer Kale is a 3-star card. The Ancient One is a 3-star card. Clea is a 2-star card. And yeah, folks, there you go. I like a lot of cards this month. I like a lot of the flavor. I like a lot of the designs. Some like totally new deck potential here with Nightmare and Morgan Le Fay. Like, I could see these like really inspiring new builds. Some crazy high roll stuff with like Tau Mandala. Dormammu is just such a sick character. I love the flavor. I love the designs. I'm actually hyped for this month of Marvel Snap. These last couple months, I mean, I had fun still, of course, but they weren't like my favorite characters or themes or card designs necessarily. But I'm in on this one, dude. This looks cool. I'm super pumped. I want more months like this. So share your thoughts on these cards down below. Let me know which ones you're planning on getting, which ones you're most excited to play, what kind of decks you think these are going to see. Lots to think and talk about, and lots of fun to be had this month in Snap. So thanks as much always for watching, and I guess I will see you around.